Ever wondered why some Formula 1 cars look so weird? Well, in the world of F1, being different can sometimes be the key to winning. Teams often try out-of-the-box designs to gain an advantage over their rivals, but occasionally they end up with creations that leave us scratching our heads. Let's delve into some of the most unusual F1 cars ever made and the stories behind them. Tyrrell P34. Tyrrell had a wild idea in 1976, and if I can go to the moon, then why not to the top of the mountain? They were using a P34 car having 4 small wheels placed at the front and 2 regular ones at the back. This was their idea, which was to make the car more slippery and also more able to grip the road better. With a pair of smaller front wheels, they expected that it would reduce air resistance and more air could flow below the car. The car had 4 wheels in front, which was the most important condition for the better ability of the car to get a good contact with the road surface and turn. Derek Gardner, the designer, used the 4-wheel drive vehicle as his inspiration. He concluded that 4 is better than 2 and therefore 6 should be even better. The P34 had its first appearance at the Spanish GP of 1976, and it was like thunder. It was fine, especially on the twisty roads where it gave me the feeling of stability and agility to steer it around sharp corners. Jody Scheckter and Patrick DePiler were privileged to find themselves on the podium several times, and Scheckter even won a race in Sweden. Nevertheless, there was the opposite opinion to this system. Scheckter was so fed up with the vehicle's problems that he called it trash. Tyrrell was experiencing issues with the tires, so the tire supplier, Goodyear, had to build special tires for the car. The P34 was removed from the game because of new rules that were passed in 1977. That's the only 6-wheeled car that won a Grand Prix, and it's a car that is very representative of F1 trying something new. Ferguson P99. The Ferguson P99 was, at the time, a unique car in Formula 1 even though it wasn't the greatest looking. It was the first and only 4-wheel drive car to win an F1 and the last one with a front engine to do so. The P99 idea was inspired by Harry Ferguson, who wanted to prove how 4-wheel drive was a better option than the 2-wheel drive. He believed it would give them more traction, be able to handle better, and they would stop faster. Yet, working it out wasn't a walk in the park. Ferguson had to reduce and lighten the weight of the drive parts to compensate for the 4-wheel drive system. He also placed the engine at the front and he squashed the box next to the driver to have everything to fit. The P99 made its debut in 1961, but that year, the rules had changed, so it was not a champion. The car, however, lost its race in other events which were against the tough competitors like Lotus and Ferrari. The P99's biggest chance came at the Gold Cup race of the International Gold Cup at Alton Park. Even a wet track didn't stop Stirling Moss from driving masterfully and winning by a great margin. It was a huge win for Ferguson and Moss as well as a sad ending. Ferguson died before his car could win, and Moss had a terrible crash that put a stop to his racing profession. Nevertheless, the P99 was unique, but 4-wheel drive was never accepted in F1. They tried it, but it got banned in 1982. Nevertheless, the P99 is a unique F1 artifact that illustrates the power of perseverance and talent. Brabham BT46B. In 1978, Brabham turned out a unique brainwave to overcome the Lotus and their ground effect car dominance. They installed a huge fan on their BT46B car, which acted as a vacuum and sucked the car down to the track. Gordon Murray, the designer, was faced with a challenge as the BT46B had a flat engine, which would not help in creating the same airflow beneath the car as the Lotus. Consequently, he made up his mind to use a fan instead of the fan. This fan, run by the engine, sucked the air under the car, thus making the car more stable and grippy. It was very wittily concealed from the public through the cover that also doubled as the rear wing. At the Swedish Grand Prix in 1978, this car made its first appearance and created a lot of buzz. Niki Lauda drove it to victory with teammate John Watson only slightly behind. The fan car was so quick that it was the only car except Watson that could lap everyone else. However, that was not the only case. The other clubs also raised the issue, claiming that the fan contraption was not in line with the regulation against moving aerodynamic devices. Brabham claimed that the fan was to cool down and not everyone accepted this. The fan car was abandoned by Brabham after only one race when he was under the pressure. It was a short but a very important moment of F1, presenting Murray's genius and innovative approach. Arrows A2. Visualize a Formula 1 car without any wings. This was the boldest act of Arrows in 1979 when they unveiled their A2 model. Rather than the previous front and rear wings, they just used the ground effect to create the downforce. Ground effect occurred by forming the bottom of the car in a way that it created a vacuum which drew the car to the track. Lotus had already proved how powerful this instrument could be. Arrows wanted to go further and have the whole car as a colossal wing. They made A2's front and back flat, then they directed air underneath the car at high speeds. They positioned the front wing above the front suspension and the rear wing between the rear ones. It was an audacious decision, but it didn't work either. The A2 was not a very stable and well-behaved car. It bounced around on the track like a kid playing on a trampoline, and it had problems with top speed and acceleration in a straight line due to excessive drag and insufficient power. Only A2 Arrows were used by the team in the first half of 1979 before returning to the more conventional design. However, the failure of the project is not to be underestimated, as the A2 is an outstanding example in aerodynamic design. Lotus 56B. Imagine the F1 car running without the traditional engine. That's what Lotus tried to do in 1971 with its 56B model. Instead of the pistons and cylinders, they used a gas turbine engine that had been previously developed for helicopters and trains. With this turbine, the engine was extremely compact and lightweight, but it was capable of putting out more power than a standard engine. Not only that, but the gearbox and the clutch were no longer needed, hence the drivetrain was more straightforward. The 56B was an offshoot of the car Lotus used at the Indy 500 in 1968, and it had a four-wheel drive transmission and a wedge-shaped body for downforce. Lotus was optimistic that the car would also go well in F1. However, they came across some issues with the gas turbine engine. It was late when you pushed the accelerator and it ran out of gas fast. It was loud as hell, and it was giving off a lot of heat as well. Moreover, it was slow on the low end, so it was difficult to hold it steady on the turns. 56B only ran in a few races in 1971 and wasn't very successful. The team's best performance was the 8th position at Monza, with Emerson Fittipaldi as the driver. This was the last time Lotus worked on a gas turbine. The next model, the 72, however, kept the wedge shape of the 56. March 711. The March 711 is known as the tea tray car due to its front wing that resembles a tray that serves tea. Robin Herd designed it to be a different concept that did not use wings to stick the car to the track, which is the usual way. Different from the typical wings, it had a flat piece at the front like a wing to push the car down. The thing that caught my attention was the flat wing that was perched on two sticks protruding from the front of the car. The driver could set an angle for different racetracks, and there was a small lip at the front to let air go around the car too. In F1, it is imperative to be inventive and think out of the box. In other cases, it is exactly the reason that results in really weird cars. However, that's the very reason why F1 is so good for fans like me. They're proof that F1 is not about speed only and cool gadgets, it is also about the making of pieces and taking up the challenges. There are lots of other odd F1 cars out there too, and I love learning about them all.